It's a pleasure for me to welcome Dr. Peter Martland of the Cambridge History Faculty to Brigham Young University, to this European Studies event, and to the Kennedy Center. Professor Martland is a research associate at Corpus Christi College. It's one of the oldest colleges at the University of Cambridge, and I think one of the most beautiful, often referred to as a gem. He has held a number of academic appointments at the university. One of them has been to associate himself with our students. So through the Pembroke College International Programs, he's worked with our Brigham Young University students for the last 5 years. This is his first time here in Utah and indeed in this part of the United States. He was very curious about it and has been informing himself about the university, about the state, about the culture, but much of what he understands he's already seen through the students. He has published various works, one work on the gramophone industry, the business that would become EMI, another one on Lord, see if I can say this in the proper way, Haw Haw, The English Voice of Nazi Germany, a biography of the notorious American-born Nazi broadcaster and propagandist based on the field files of the Mi5. He was also the editor of The Future of the Past, a series of essays by distinguished Cambridge historians. He also has published a work, I believe it's a treatise on the history of Corpus Christi College, if I saw correctly. He has had numerous students, including BYU students, whom he's helped to train at Cambridge University. He took his PhD in history from Cambridge. We're very pleased to welcome Dr. Peter Martland.
Wow. This is a bit of a homecoming for me, although this is my first visit here. I feel I know it very well, and to look around and see so many good friends, former students, people who I know regard me as their friend, and some whose friendship I value enormously. Why you should have, on the basis of what Paul told you, why I should be talking to you about intelligence might seem a bit obscure, but if I can add that I spent the last 5 years as part of the research team working on the recently published official history of MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence service, authored by my friend and colleague Christopher Andrew. So today I want to talk to you about Anglo-American cooperation, 1938 style. Well, the Anglo-American intelligence relationship has endured for nearly 70 years, and today no one's alive who can remember a time when it wasn't at the core of the broader Anglo-American political and defence alliance. It's survived through good times and bad, and it's fair to say that no two countries have shared so many secrets over such a period of time. The relationship has endured because it has always been highly professional, practical and mutually beneficial. It has stood the test of time and has usually delivered the goods, and is based on pragmatism and certainly not sentiment. The practical relationship was seen on the 12th of September 2001 with the flight from London to Washington, D.C. made by Sir Richard Dearlove, then head of MI6, Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service, and now the master of Pembroke College, Cambridge, and whom many of you in this hall have met, and indeed those of you who have heard the story from his lips. He went to Washington with other key British intelligence figures. This was a flight arranged by the President and Prime Minister, and the only one to enter US airspace during the post-9/11 closure period. On his arrival, Dearlove went to the White House, where he was briefed by the President and top administration figures, who he then briefed. The British team brought not just sympathy for colleagues and friends, but also their books. And meetings began immediately. By the time they left, both communities had fresh insights and understanding that have grown and developed as critical policy-making tools. And I think that event is the clearest indicator as to where the Anglo-American relationship stands at the start of the 21st century. Now, that's great, but I want to look at a disastrous, almost farcical state of affairs between the two communities in the year 1938, the eve of the Second World War. Now, my purpose is not to drag out dirty old washing or show myself up as un-British or anti-American, but rather to quote Winston Churchill, the only historian ever to hold the office of Prime Minister, the further back you look, the further forward you can see. But as I said to students this morning, he also said, history will be kind to me because I intend to write it. He did, and it was. I've learned from my work at MI5 that in-house inquests can be a very important tool for any Western intelligence agency. Remember the old saying, those who do not understand past mistakes are likely to repeat them. I want to show that with this particular historical event, just how things can go right and raise expectations, and then go disastrously wrong at every point. The events take place in 1938 when Britain faced an aggressive, expansionary Germany with its own defences and intelligence communities run down and a weak and bitterly divided France as its only ally. Britain was desperate for allies and intelligence partners, of who the United States was the most obvious, but one in the end that would not play. Today we know that by 1938 the gangsters of the world were on the move. However, at the time, Britain, France and the United States were all in denial, with appeasement in the ascendant in France and Britain and isolationism in the United States. Though frankly anyone with half a brain could see that war was imminent. The case I want to discuss provided MI5, again I remind you, Britain's domestic intelligence service, with what it saw as an opportunity to create an Anglo-American intelligence relationship. In itself a rational, though as events show, naive attempt to create a system of intelligence sharing. Unfortunately, at the time and for some times after, the British hit the brick wall of US neutrality laws, its then isolationism, and the dire consequences of those policies. The truth was, until 1941, and despite pressing need, MI5 had no direct contact with the FBI or with the US military or naval intelligence agencies. There were a number of reasons for this, including the isolationist view that it was immoral for a nation like the United States to have intelligence agencies, and true to that morality, it had got rid of them all. In their minds, the greatest possible calumny was to engage with foreign intelligence services, especially the British, who they believed had conned America into the First World War. Today it is difficult to comprehend these views, but we have to remember that during these pre-Pearl Harbor years, many Americans feared Hitler for what he might do, but hated Churchill for his attempts to drag the US into war. So let's turn to the case itself and then to its consequences on both sides of the Atlantic. Now, it's possible to do that because many of the files survive in both US and British National Archives. And for this purpose, I've drawn on the MI5 documents in London. The British players include Guy Liddell, the head of MI5's counter-espionage, and a descendant of Alice Liddell, the lady who Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland about. Mirrors, mirrors, mirrors. They're always there if you look hard enough. So the head of counter-espionage Then there is a hairdresser in Scotland. Always beware of hairdressers, is my advice, especially Scottish. And a Scottish postmaster. The Germans include military intelligence, known as the Abwehr, the German Ausland movement, which was a Nazi front for Germans resident abroad, and it operated clandestinely in the United States, plus sundry Nazi spies and saboteurs. The Americans were J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, the State Department, Navy and War, with offstage noises from Congress. It's a story I think we can learn a lot from in 2010, and one that's worth telling, and I hope this intrigued you sufficiently not to run out on me. So, late 1937, in a hairdresser's shop in Dundee, Scotland, owned by Jessie Jordan, a British-born widow of a German. The local postmaster noted the delivery of lots of mail from the United States and her posting a lot more to an address in Hamburg, Germany. He told MI5, who recognised the German address as an Abwehr postbox, and obtained a mail intercept warrant which revealed she was indeed a postbox for German intelligence, a cutout. For some time, British intelligence simply watched and read. But in January 1938, matters went critical when intercepts revealed a major espionage and security plot in the United States. In essence, Nazi agents planned to kidnap the American military officer responsible for the defense of the Atlantic coast and force him to give up current regional defense plans. Despite its Abwehr credentials, the plan was a crude, unsophisticated affair, though the intelligence revealed some first-rate tradecraft. For example, clues were to be left implicating communists. And if the trail left the US and landed in Dundee, they hoped the British might be implicated. Although the intercepts failed to disclose the identity of the US-based German agents, they did reveal one as an army deserter with access to several air bases. Guy Liddell, the head of counter-espionage, passed the information on to the US military attaché in London. There was no liaison at the time. He just happened to know the man socially. This is where we're at. Of key importance to this narrative was Liddell's insistence that no indication whatsoever should be given to the fact that the intelligence was obtained in Great Britain. Remember this. At this point, this fact suited both sides. War Department told FBI, who warned the officer and staked out the building to be used for the sting. In the event the plot was cancelled, we still don't know the reasons for this. However, a few days later, the FBI picked up a key Nazi espionage agent, Gunther Gustav Rumrich, a German-born naturalized US citizen and an army deserter. Another plotter, Erich Glaser of the United States Army Air Corps, was also arrested. Both had communicated with their controllers via the Jessie Jordan postbox. Curiously, they'd been arrested not in connection with the kidnap plot, but following a botched attempt to impersonate Secretary of State Cordell Hull so as to obtain a quantity of blank US passports for use by Nazi agents operating in the Soviet Union under the guise of American citizens. Well, Rumrich squealed and implicated other Nazi agents operating within the US, which in turn revealed a sophisticated plan for German penetration of US military bases and munition plants. The FBI learned that most of the Abwehr controllers worked as officers and stewards on ocean liners of the Hamburg-American and Deutsche Lloyd steamship companies operating out of the port of New York. It was also revealed that they received instructions from Erich Pfeiffer, who headed the Abwehr station in Bremen and ran espionage activities in the US and Canada. He was well known to MI5. In the end, the Rumrich revelations led to the unravelling of what was seen as the most important pre-war Nazi espionage and sabotage operation in the United States. It also showed the extent to which the country had been penetrated and its vulnerability to espionage and sabotage. In April 1938, on the back of this success, Guy Liddell visited the United States to try and create a system of liaison with state, FBI, naval and military intelligence. Unfortunately, this proved a somewhat pious, naive aspiration, and Liddell found himself tossed and turned at every point. He returned to London with hopes, but little else. When he arrived in Washington, he had an introductory letter from the military attaché to his boss in war, who, as he said, had been intimately connected with the German espionage case. Unfortunately, after a positive start, the guy gave him a briefing. He went back the following day. He was told that they were not permitted to discuss any matters with him and turned him over to state. And a political officer who knew little about the Rumrich case but was generally interested in Nazi, fascist and communist activities. State were, according to Liddell, anxious to exchange information on German and Italian activities in the US. For that reason, anxious to get British intelligence about what was going on in the United States. Critically for the future, he was told that all information must be transmitted through the Chargé d'Affaires in London and not the military or naval attaches. State would control. It was made clear that such a liaison would have to be on a strictly confidential basis, which is fine, since disclosure would result in difficult questions being asked in the isolationist Congress. The State Department officials seemed fully alive to US-based Nazi Germany and Italian fascist organisation. According to Liddell, the German and Italian embassies had been told party groups like the Ausland would not be tolerated and constituted a virtual infringement of sovereignty. This was accepted by the German and Italians without demur, and Liddell learned that the German ambassador had given assurances that such organisations did not exist. The assurance had been coupled with a declaration from Hitler that no German citizen in the United States were to be owned to the Friends of New Germany, the Volksbund. I'll bet everybody slept soundly in their beds after getting that set of assurances. Liddell told the State Department official that he could take it as a certainty that Nazi groups did exist, though not openly, as subsequent FBI investigations proved. However, this was not the main issue Liddell encountered. As he later pointed out, the real trouble is having obtained an assurance from the German intelligence the party organisations have been liquidated. The US authorities have no adequate machinery for seeing that this undertaking has been carried out. The State Department themselves have only a few agents who are employed mainly on passport investigations. The American Secret Service that existed during World War I was more or less liquidated in 1919. Other services are the Narcotics Bureau and the Customs, who have their own agents, and the Post Office, who have special agents for inquiring into pilfering by their own employees. That's the American intelligence community in 1938. Liddell also met with Justice Department officials, telling them that Mi5 liaison would provide, amongst other benefits, access to its records. As he said, the officials gave me a detailed account of the German case, though I was not shown any actual documents. I impressed upon them the importance of giving us the fullest particulars possible, since our records dated back to pre-1914 days, and might be of considerable value in checking up on various names that came to light in the course of inquiries. After meeting with Hoover, who was enthusiastic about the prospects of liaison with Mi5, Liddell went to New York, where he met FBI officer Leon Thuron, an experienced criminal investigator, but with no experience in espionage matters. He was able to add to Liddell's knowledge. He told me that 80% of the information obtained by the Germans in the US was being sold by Pfeiffer to the Japanese at a very high price. Honour amongst thieves comes to mind here. And that on the admission of rum-rich postboxes in England for communication of information from the US to Germany had been established to throw the onus on the British in the event of unpleasant revelations. He goes on to say how he was given full details, saw some reports, and he was impressed. I was struck with the thoroughness of the investigation. He told about the way they squealed, and he thought that as many as 20 people would be indicted in this case. He said the results of these inquiries have been an eye-opener for the State Department, War and FBI. The War had for a long time been trying to get the funds to start an investigation department of their own and intend to make the case, use of the case to bring pressure on the authorities, whilst the FBI hope in due course to improve their position vis-à-vis the public by appearing to be the role of guardians of state secrets. Gosh. Liddell made a second visit to New York where Thoreau told him that indictments had been drawn up against a number of Germans in the US and Germany and against the two steamship lines. Thoreau added that the US Embassy were recommending to Berlin that some indicted figures should surrender to US authority and plead guilty. In this way, they would avoid public exposure of evidence and damage to US-German relations. I bet Hitler lost a lot of sleep over that suggestion. You know, these people, they've lost it. They've never got it. They've never lost it. Thoreau told Liddell that investigations had revealed great laxity regarding the custody of confidential plans, particularly in Navy. In some cases, he had found that blueprints were sent to outside firms to be duplicated. In general, aliens were not employed in government work because every factory was riddled with people of alien origin. According to Liddell, it was at this point the whole thing fell to pieces. As the FBI website on the affair admits, Leon Thoreau sold stories about the Rumrich case to New York newspapers. As a seasoned criminal investigator, he would have done this regularly to earn a bit of extra money. He then left the FBI, though the website says he was dismissed, and using his case notes wrote a series of articles and later a sensational book, which was subsequently made into a film which I haven't seen. And he committed the cardinal sin of implicating MI5 and naming an agent. Subsequently, Liddell found himself back in Washington at the War Department in conversation with the military officer he'd originally met. They went for a farewell drink before he left for London. At the time, there were a further series of damaging leaks. I mean, it does get worse. I'm sorry about this, guys. This time, the grand jury deliberations. Liddell wondered if Thoreau was the source, but learned that the leak came from a Navy Department source whose boss was a director of the newspaper concerned. We want to form an intelligence relationship with these clowns. And it's 1938, the middle of the Munich crisis we're looking at here. It was not the end of the leaks, for on the 11th of August 1938, a newspaper article appeared revealing the chain of Nazi spies stretching from America to Scotland and on to continental Europe, and claiming all the credit for uncovering them for Lamar Hardy, the US Attorney for the Southern District of New York. I haven't mentioned him so far, have I? That's because he wasn't involved. The article said, this is a one that you couldn't make this one up. Working with G-men, tall, lank-haired US Attorney Lamar Hardy last spring unearthed a chain of Nazi spy. Now in London, on holiday. Relentless spy chaser Hardy was last week revealed to have been conferring secretly with Scotland Yard Special Branch and with the French Sûreté Nationale, facts uncovered by Attorney Hardy and subsequently transmitted to MI5, the British Military Intelligence Department, led to the arrest and imprisonment of Dundee hairdresser Jesse Jordan on Spies. He has got good PR, hasn't he? I mean, you've got to admit. Since Mr. Hardy's arrival in England, convict Jordan, now an inmate in Slaughterton Jail in Edinburgh, has been visited by Colonel Hinchley Cook of the War Officer. He was a senior MI5 officer. And we want a relationship with these people. It was in this manner, it is hoped that Mrs. Jordan's accomplices, if still in this country, will be discovered. Methods by which she could have transmitted information to Berlin are still being investigated. Scottish ports secret agents are keeping a close watch. That's great stuff. In New York, a grand jury is meantime hearing new evidence concerning the Nazi spy ring. 18 implicated persons face a maximum sentence of 20 years. I think 4 people went on trial because where were the other 16? They were in Germany. But we've got a great story. And guess who is standing for public office that October? The great spy catcher. Anything to get elected. In November 1938, the case came to trial. Rumrich pleaded guilty and in a plea bargain turned state's evidence. Convictions were obtained in the cases of Joanna Hoffman, a hairdresser on the European liner Europa. I warned you about these hairdressers, who got 4 years. Otto Hermann Voss got 6 years, Eric Glaser got 2, and Rumrich got 2. It was recognised that the defendants were all small fry. The big ones got away to Germany. But people felt pretty good, and that's all that matters. Despite the hard sell, despite the difficulties he encountered, Liddell returned to London believing the US authorities were pleased with the intelligence received from London, and the FDI and the American Armed Forces hoped to use the episode to lobby for the creation of a counter-espionage machinery. He noted, however, that state had insisted everything pass through its hands. This was not what he wanted, and hoped he could persuade the attaché to permit direct contact on relevant matters with War and Navy and FBI. Despite the hard sell, little, if anything, changed, and no official links were formed. Critical to this impasse was the State Department Conduit, which was designed to contain any political fallout if Congress discovered US intelligence were obtaining information from MI5. It was a bottleneck from the start. State decided priorities and whether or not the FBI on naval or military intelligence even saw the material. They also decided what, if anything, was sent to MI5. State had no knowledge of the clandestine world and few incentives to pass on vital intelligence. It frankly neither wanted nor understood. The consequences were inevitable, and soon the FBI, naval and military intelligence saw the problem lying not with state but with MI5, who they believed were holding out on them. It was not until the formation of the British Security Coordination in June 1941, which is almost 2 years into World War II, that direct FBI MI5 contact began. But even then, other agencies were excluded. So, what does this episode tell us, and what might be of use in 2010? Well, first, in 1938, British and American policymakers had developed unsustainable policies which were self-evidently not working. And they had very low opinion of the intelligence community. As a consequence, the security on both sides of in both countries was weakened and left vulnerable to penetration by espionage and sabotage agents, and in the end, to opportunistic attack. For the British, for that read Guy Liddell, On the back of a single success, they believed they had an irresistible hand of cards to play. Coming back to the US with that attitude was a complete mistake. That said, Liddell and his colleagues knew, despite the lateness of the hour, the US remained on a peacetime footing with little, if any, interest in foreign affairs, counter-espionage and security. What they failed to realise was how deep that lack of interest went, or the delicate political machinations at play in Washington, D.C. between 1938 and the Pearl Harbor attack. Liddell wanted to see American intelligence community as professional and discreet. Sweet man. He did not take on board until it was too late either the pecking order in Washington or the dominant policing rather than intelligence role played by the FBI. And I think that's a point you can see in 2010. His dismay at the Leon Turreau debacle illustrates just how dismal his reading of the situation was. MI5 and British intelligence policymakers saw the interests of Britain and the United States as coinciding. Their problem was that was not how their opposite numbers saw it. The political fears of State Department policymakers were critical in making them isolate and set themselves up or as determiners of MI5 intelligence. As a result, much of the material, if and when it reached the desk of those who might have used it, had been rendered worthless by the passage of time. Remember, 90% of intelligence is very, very time sensitive. Much to the chagrin of those intelligence practitioners who needed it. In the end, we know that if the intelligence cycle breaks at the first tasking point, policymakers asking intelligence communities to provide information, then there is significantly greater potential for it to break at every point in the cycle. And this is clearly what happens in the years between 1938 to 1941. The consequences of this failed attempt to create an Anglo-intelligence relationship was severe. However, it began to change after 1941 when the British Security Coordination was established and must be seen as part of the US's own belated crank-up to war. This move enabled the relationship to get underway in a purely pragmatic and professional manner. The consequence of that and the entrance of the United States into the war that meant that if we fast forward to 1945, we see this relation has become the best in the world, and frankly, the best in the history of the world. There we go.
While Professor Martin is having a little drink here, he has agreed to field questions. We asked that he not go the full hour, so there would be some time for question and answers, and it can be either related to this or to other matters that you might be interested in that he might be able to comment on. I should add, he mentioned the work that he was doing with Professor Christopher Andrews. Professor Andrew was here about 3 years ago. A conference was held. He was the keynote speaker. The book that he worked on, that is that Professor Andrew wrote and that Professor Martland, Dr. Martland helped to write, had a footnote in it that I guess I should start calling the footnote that was heard around the world, in which Dr. Martland discovered that Mussolini had been in the pay of MI5 in 1917 and 1918. And this has now been carried through the news media just recently, but in the last month. Anyway, questions, please, for Dr. Martland. Please. Professor Choate.
I wanted to ask about the special relationship now. I was reading in British media that since the Iraq War and the recriminations over the Iraq War, that Britain was treated like the lapdog, and it's all over now. The special relationship is dead, and President Barack Obama, who's family was from Kenya, was resentful towards Britain as the former imperial ruler of Britain, and when the president received the prime minister as his official gift of state to a fellow world leader, he gave him a box of DVDs as an insult to the visitor. So I wanted to ask about the current and future status of the special relationship.
I suppose one should also add, wasn't there the bust of Churchill that was returned through the current administration?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the special relationship. I work on the intelligence relationship, and I don't think it matters whether the political relationship is up or down. I think one of the things working on the project I worked on that shows that even in the most dreadful times of political relationships, the intelligence relationship keeps going. I mean, I think in the end we're stuck with each other. We may not like each other, we may have ups and downs, but where on earth do we go? Does the US need British intelligence? Does Britain need US intelligence? I remember Richard Dalov said, look, if this relationship stopped working, it would the intelligence relationship would cease. I mean, he said that to us, made it very clear. And I don't really think I can ask anymore. There is an official relationship document, but there's nothing written, carved in stone. It just works. And yes, I would, if I may, just add that we're in a particularly hyperventilating press period at the moment, where elections are being held in Britain in a month's time. I noticed that American politics are nice and smooth and quiet at the moment. So wouldn't you expect the press to make the comments you've just cited? And is there any truth in them? Who knows? Who cares? All I know is the professional relationship carries on. Please. Yeah, you need to wait for the...
If you would please expand a little bit more on this relationship between MI5 and Mussolini.
Well, this is not what I'm talking about. Come and see me afterwards. Please.
So when you said that some Americans thought that the British tricked them into the war.
The First World War.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, or you think it was just like...
I mean, isn't America so stupid and naive that it goes to war because it's conned into it? Come on. I mean, really? Is this how international affairs works in this country? I mean, yeah. America went to war out of self-interest. America went to war because the Germans told the Americans, you send a ship outside your ports and we'll sink it. If you accept that, then you've lost your sovereignty. It's an act of war. It's about today. You send an aircraft into the skies outside the continental United States and an enemy says, we'll shoot everyone down. You know, that's an act of war. That's why you go to war. Please. Anybody else? Wow. There we go, Jake. I didn't plant this question.
I wonder if you might speak about the outcome of the Abdullah case and how that might impact the professional intelligence relationship. The Abdullah case, wherein the British courts ruled that they could release secret intelligence that had been given to them by the American CIA. Do you think that will impact the intelligence relationship?
We keep hearing that it will. I'm not so sure. I mean, our courts are much more prepared to force governments to reveal documents than American courts are. I know that's controversial, but I think it's true. The problem was the documents relate to CIA torture of a British resident held at Guantanamo Bay. So the issue is the Americans didn't tell the British that they were torturing people. As someone said about the lapdog comment. And I know the then head of MI5, Eliza Manning and Bullock, said when she was getting these reports in 2000, what it would have been 5, 6 when she first came into post, she said, "Why are these people spilling the beans?" She was very experienced with Irish terrorism. Remember, the British fought an insurgency for 30 years against Irish terrorism. The Irish terrorists did not spill the beans. So that's the model that we were used to. Why? Oh, they're proud of what they're doing. I mean, if she made a mistake, it was accepted as such a stupid explanation. So, what do you do? Well, the Americans want to be able to torture people and not have the British courts let on, is one view of it. Or if the Americans are torturing people and the information comes to Britain, then should the British know how the information has been obtained? Who trusts who about what? I mean, the bottom line is you shouldn't torture people, it's naughty. Yeah, I mean that's the answer. Sadly, the US has been caught with its hand in the till, and the sooner it's sorted out, the better. But the idea that therefore that means Britain is an untrustworthy intelligence ally strikes me as a false point. It may be that there are people in the present administration and the last administration that say that it does mean that we're a bad ally, but then again you've got the president saying that we signed up to these conventions, you've got the court saying, the US said we signed, these are not optional, these treaties are not optional, you don't go around waterboarding people 160 times to get information out of them. I can also say that, of course, the British have done torture in the past, which it would be stupid to say we didn't. But it was interesting during World War II when we had a lot of people coming into Britain when it was isolated from occupied Europe, and they were put through Camp O2O. The head of the camp, Tin-Eye Stevens, called Tin-Eye because he had a monocle, that said he would not torture people. He would use intense psychological pressure. He would not torture people because he said, you do not trust anything obtained under torture. It's dumb, it's stupid to do these kind of things. It bounces. I mean, the problem is in liberal democracy, I mean, the bottom line is, who is dumb enough in Washington to think you can keep a secret? I mean, isn't that the point? Washington leaks like a sieve, it always has done, it always will do. So the idea you can keep the lid on this kind of stuff is patently absurd. But you raise it, I mean, it is a point. You've got to trust each other. I mean, Eliza Manning and Bullock is absolutely furious that she was purposely deceived by the American intelligence community on this. This is not how you treat your partners, full stop. So they can scream and shout all they want in Washington, but in the end, all through their own misfortune, and if as a consequence they don't want to send us any more secrets, well, there's not much we can do about it. Any other question, please?
Just a question of curiosity. To return to World War II, is it known whether Mosley, the head of the British fascists, was corresponding or had connections with German agents during World War II?
During World War II, it would have been a bit difficult because from the 24th of May 1940 he was in jail. That's a bit difficult.
He was released though.
1944, his phone was tapped and his mail was always separated. there was no way. I mean, it was one of the most successful close downs of an organisation there's ever been, both in terms of what then happens in Britain that destroys any support for either fascism or a negotiated settlement with Germany, the Blitz. Remember, the Blitz destroys 60,000 people by the end of the war, and 1/3 of all buildings are either damaged or destroyed. So, you're not going to go talk to these people, are you? There's the externals, but there is also the internals. The fascist movement was very effectively closed down. I mean, it is a curious episode. The internment. The MI5 had been pressing for it since the war began, and indeed in 1935 it had gone into the war book at MI5's insistence that British subjects, British citizens, as opposed to aliens, enemy aliens, might have to be interned during a total war. The numbers are very small. Initially there were about 1,800, but within a couple of months it was halved, and by the middle of the war it was 300-400 involved out of 43 million people. But frankly, MI5 files on it, which are in the public domain now, they make it clear that there'll be a backlash against this at the end of World War II. And down to the present day, debates about how long people can be kept in custody on terrorist charges without being brought before a court, which in Britain is 28 days. And it's only been about half a dozen people being detained like that. But it causes very, very serious debates, and they're exactly the debates that happened during and after World War II, all of the internal fascist people. But what do you do if you're fighting for your very existence? This is not some abstract thing. The bombs are falling. Britain is on the point of being invaded. You're fighting for your national survival. What do you do? And you do everything you can is the answer. And some of those are not nice. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, that's good. We wanted to stop here. You've got to go to your classes. Let's thank Dr. Martland again. Thank you.